police tried to smash the window of Sidney Deal's car, he stopped them. It was a new car, a beautiful Nissan Altima, black with chrome trim, which he was finally able to buy thanks to an $18 an hour job he just started. That car was his baby. No way was Sidney going to let them damage it. The cops weren't the only one who wanted to smash his window either. A crowd gathered while he spoke to the cops. When they saw Sidney Deal's daughter curled up on the floor of the car in the back seat, they voiced their concern. But the car was running. The air conditioning was on. Sidney switched it on when he ran back to get his phone, which is how he ended up locking the keys inside. When Sidney's brother Sumit arrived, he ripped off his shirt and wrapped it around his knuckles to go for the glass. It was just past 3 p.m. in Las Vegas, 98 degrees. But Sidney wasn't having it. He held his brother back from breaking the window and pointed out that the engine was still running. Sidney couldn't afford a broken window. He couldn't afford a locksmith out of pocket either. That's why he rejected the cops' offer to call a tow truck. Sidney was holding out for his mother's roadside assistance service to call him back to see if he could piggyback on her coverage. Meanwhile, his daughter, Saya, had been alone in the car for 42 minutes, and she had stopped moving. Sidney claims he could still see her breathing, that she was napping on the floor. In his Facebook photos, Sidney Deal wears nice things. Dior and Burberry shirts, gold chains with lettering, designer jeans with zips all the way down to the knee, thick gold watches. This car, Sidney's Nissan Altima, it was more than just a ride to his new job. It was the best thing he'd ever owned. It represented a step up for Sidney. He couldn't pay for a broken window or a locksmith or a tow, but he didn't need to. He left the engine running and the AC on. At least, he's pretty sure he did. When Las Vegas Metro Police finally smashed the window, the inside of the car had reached about 170 degrees. Neighbors claimed the cops had been waiting on permission from supervisors to damage Deal's car without his consent. When they pulled Deal's daughter out of the Nissan Altima, Saya Deal, 21 months old, had passed away. There are stories throughout history of gold and silver miners having their boats capsized in rivers while crossing the Atlantic. Stories where miners would have survived if they'd emptied their pockets of heavy ore they carried. Or in Sidney Deal's case, a daughter that would have survived if he had been willing to damage his brand new ride. These are pretty extreme cases of object attachment. You and I might have some unread books on our shelf, or a guitar we've never played hanging on the wall. At worst, a couch and storage unit somewhere. But nothing like today's story, right? What if I were to tell you right now, according to our best data, that there are 7 square feet of self-storage space in America for every man, woman, and child? Pretty eerie number during COVID, since America is facing a housing crisis of epic proportions once the eviction moratorium comes up. 7 square feet of roof storage space would be enough to cover every American if we all stood really still. To talk about our addiction to stuff and why it's so damn hard to let go, we have a few myths and a few tips. Myths like: Myth 1. People who can't let go of their stuff are called hoarders. I'm not a hoarder. I just like shopping. It's called retail therapy, and it's perfectly healthy. Myth 2. So there's exactly a coffin's worth of used storage space for every person in America. So what? It's not like all that extra stuff is adversely affecting our lives, right? Myth 3. Does this thing spark joy? That's a true metric for how much we value our things, right? But what if everything we own sparks joy? Which happens to be the case according to science. We'll get to our myths about storage and our attachment to our stuff. But first, I want to walk through the events that led up to Deal's death.
So this might be the most tragic story we have talked about on this episode. And we kind of want to get that out of the way, as the narrative does not really stray away from our opening. So if you are sensitive to this kind of story, we advise maybe skipping to the next episode. Go listen to Mr. Rogers and Being Nice. I think that's a very good episode.
It's a tough one for me. You know, a little baby passes away. It's so preventable. And to try to place the blame game, and as we go through the story, you're going to see there's more than one adult.
Right. Well, I think that's... we won't spoil everything in the episode, but really the thing we want to point out while we record this is that it is everyone. We found the most extreme example of somebody being attached to their stuff, but it is everyone. Everyone is attached to their stuff. It's not a disorder. And also, Sidney Deal wasn't a bad person. Like I saw a lot of people online trying to slander him and say that, you know, he was too attached to the car and he prioritized it over his daughter. But honestly, when you find pictures of him and you look through his like Facebook and stuff, he was not a bad guy. Like I really truly believe it was just poor decision making, a horrible series of events. So with that warning to the general public out of the way, do you want to start with the chronological order of it, kind of like an episode of CIS or something?
Sidney Deal was having an argument. He has his daughter with him, who he had with him a lot. He was a very doting father, and all the neighbors of his friends, neighbor of his relatives, neighbor of his girlfriends said they always saw his daughter right at his hip.
Okay.
So they were best friends. He was having an argument with his girlfriend that day, and it was getting heated, so he forgot and he had locked his keys in the car. He got out of the car to get his cell phone that he had left with his girlfriend in his admitted argument. He goes back and finds out that the car keys were in it, and he had his phone with him, but his daughter was actually locked in the car.
Okay. So we're going to start with like step one. Have you ever been, when you were a kid, were you ever around your parents when they were arguing?
Yes. I think the Lamentses are professional arguers. Yeah, we still do. We haven't retired from that yelling. You've seen us yell and scream, me and the wife.
If I had a soundproof booth that I could have slipped into as a kid that would have like blocked out my parents arguing,
okay,
it would have saved me years of professional therapy. So let's start with the first one, which is Sidney should have never had his daughter in the car. Honestly, if the AC is running and the car is in line of sight, which it was, I actually don't blame him on this first step. I would have put my kid in the car and said, you know, read a book, take a nap, you know, as long as you see it is okay.
And I know what it's like to be a young man and get heated.
Yeah.
Your testosterone spikes and you want to make your point and you might slam a door and...
Right. And who wants their kid to hear that?
Yeah. So Sidney Deal goes up to the window of the car. My daughter's in there. God damn, I locked the keys in there. Like anybody would. So he gets to let's fix this. And they get down to business right away. He knew the air conditioning was on. They're in Vegas. The air conditioning, Joe, in Vegas is what?
Always on.
Right. We're not in Portland, Oregon here. So they called a locksmith. And they were on hold for something like 23 minutes. Sidney Deal didn't have any money. So then he thought that maybe he had insurance coverage would cover the AAA, but it would not. So he finds out how much it is for them to come out and pop the lock, and he's like, I just won't do it. So is that okay? I mean, I don't know how much money you have, but at that point you could beg for money and get...
Yes.
I find it hard to believe, for starters.
I would be upset if I was Sidney Deal's family at this point. Like if, you know, completely ignore the part where his daughter is in danger. I would just be upset with him because he had not gotten this covered somehow. However, I will say some locksmiths do overcharge a crazy amount. Like I can totally see being in an argument, then getting on the phone and calling a locksmith, finding out that they're going to overcharge me, and then just refusing it, like saying, no thanks, I'll go through something else.
And not knowing the immediate danger.
Right, exactly. Is a 21-year-old, or sorry, 21, is a 21-month-year-old capable of like following enough instructions to open a door latch?
No.
Because my first thought was, why can't he just point at the door, like wake her up, point at the door and say, open it? But
that's a baby.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not. And no. Yeah, I mean, and the baby they thought we're sleeping, and probably was, and you know, they could pound on it and scare them. They thought they were going to be able to resolve this. Now, as soon as she hung up the phone, it was around 3:33. So she gets off 4 minutes later from the locksmith. Plan B, they flag down. I'm waving my arms. They flag down the police officers. Okay. So the police stop. And the police offer to break the window right away. They say, well, we'll break the window or we'll call you a tow truck or locksmith. And he says, you're not going to break my window. And I just called a tow truck thing, and we spent 23 minutes on hold of them, but it was too expensive. I can't afford that. I'm not going to spend that. And I kind of do get the feeling that he is a little overbearing, my car, my daughter, my everything.
Right.
To a fault, obviously.
Yeah. When we start the narrative, the opening of the story, we talk about how much he is into sort of his things, that he really has impeccable taste. Like, you see pictures of him. This isn't like, I'm trying to think of a way to put it. His dress and demeanor and like what he wears, it is really like not flashy per se. It is tasteful. It is Hollywood. Like he doesn't have a Hollywood budget. He's working a new, was it $18 an hour job? So he is dressing like his idols, but he does not have the money to do that, basically.
Yeah, every part of him is impeccably clean. How his facial hair is groomed. He looks like the kind of guy you could tell that his jeans have been pressed. The car is so clean. It's a Nissan Altima, which is an entry-level cheap car.
Yeah.
He has it cleaned, detailed, polished like you would a brand new $100,000 Mercedes.
Right.
Impeccably clean himself and his car.
Yeah. We're going to kind of stop there and start talking about, is this a disorder? So I'm sorry to bring our narrative to a screeching halt.
I need a break. It's
okay.
Upsetting. The poor kiddo. You just want to kill him, right?
Yeah. Well,
you want to bake him in a car.
Yeah. It's going to be hard for me to not be angry at him, to not blame him as a father and say that this is just irresponsibility. But when you take this step by step, it actually doesn't. You can see his side of things. We are going to actually stop and break down what's happening and talk about our myths pretty regularly during this. Like, we want to stop, chunk this up, analyze it like we're going through a crime scene, and figure out what went wrong and like what the disorders are, or the psychology, or why this is an everyone problem, not a Sidney Deal problem. So first off, what's the likelihood that Sidney Deal was suffering from a disorder of some sort? I was telling a friend about this story, like during our initial research, and this story came up. I was looking for the modern version of people crossing rivers with ore in their pockets. So originally, our narrative for today's story was going to be these miners who would go out, get silver and gold ore, and they'd be on their way back to town, or they'd be crossing like an ocean sometimes. Usually it was a river, and their boat would get lost, and they would refuse to let go of the silver or gold, like the mineral that they had pulled out of a mountain. It represented, of course, money value, but they would die for it. So this is the modern version. Our modern version is, dying for a car, basically.
When I lived in Seattle, there was this homeless man that was homeless right where I lived, and he always had this. It's like almost like a train of shopping carts, and he'd go everywhere with it. It would take him along. It was probably 10 different carts. It was like his own little apartment, and he would move it around. And just what you just said, he needs to let go of all these things.
Yeah,
it's slowing him down, and it's actually keeping him homeless.
It's literally dragging and holding him back. Yeah, it is so interesting.
He thinks he can't live without those things, and those are absolutely things that are sinking. That's his anchor. That's sinking his ship.
We had a homeless outreach next to. We have a service here called Clean and Safe in Portland Patrol, and they are like subcontracted through the police, or they're an arm of law enforcement, but they go around and they clean things and check on the homeless. And they used to talk about how during their outreach program, it's crazy and shocking how many transients here in the city have storage units.
Really?
When they become homeless, they will put money forward to store their stuff, and they'll have. I mean, they lose their units all the time.
But they that's their first priority.
Yeah,
is their stuff.
Most of them start out with a storage unit, and when they first hit the streets, or it's all at a friend's house, which is probably what I would do, unfortunately. So first off, hoarding can be a disorder, but we're going to kind of break down why this isn't necessarily a hoarding problem. Because I kind of blame the show. There's a show called Hoarders. I think there's a show called Extreme Hoarders.
Yeah, I'm a fan of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever wondered if you are a hoarder?
By the look of the studio right now, no, I am not a hoarder.
Okay.
You don't think I'm a hoarder, am I?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't have this. I'm not into stuff.
Well, when I first met you, you had a guitar hanging in the corner, and I asked, do you play that thing?
I read that in the thing. He's making fun of me. I still have that guitar. I have this beautiful guitar, and it's so people see it, and they think, oh, Todd must be a musician. He plays the guitar. He's so well-rounded. It's just for looks, folks.
I swear to God, you are like the 9th guy friend I've had where I have spotted a guitar in the corner, and they've either gotten lessons once or twice or never played. I don't blame you. I just got rid of a pallet of books. Yeah, it's for looks. No, I'm like the lawyer of fantasy and sci-fi. I have to have all of my books behind me, so you know how well read I am, and that is my hoarding. Is I have a wall of books. But legit hoarding. So I'm gonna. Legitimate hoarding, like the show Hoarders, when they run into those people who, if you like your nice guitar in the corner, that is not hoarding. That is, you have a decorative piece of something that you plan to do something with eventually, and it hasn't left its stand for a while. Or in my case, the books haven't left their shelf in a while. I haven't sat in the corner and read in the last year. I'm doing everything on Kindle. I don't need those physical copies. So that is not necessarily hoarding. That is just you have something that sparks joy in you, or to use self-help parlance. But it's not necessarily a disorder. Hoarding is when we see in those shows where they have attachments to literal garbage. They will be fighting the people in those shows to have a stack of newspapers removed. Or there's a bunch of
expired food.
Expired food.
Yeah.
Things in the garage where animals have literally died, pets have died around them, and they don't want to give up a swamp cooler that hasn't been turned on for months. Hoarding is a type of obsessive compulsive disorder. That is something I did not expect. I had read once that when attention deficit disorder and OCD meet, because they're both on the spectrum, where they intersect is actually where you get hoarding. You basically get, I'll read from the article here. I don't want to mislead anyone. And like all episodes where we start with disorders in psychology, I will state, Todd and I don't have medical degrees. We're not psychologists. We are simply reading from smarter, better sources, and we are going to use that as sort of our cornerstone for this episode. So this is from Psychology Today, and it's just simply called The Psychology Behind Hoarding. So follow our links if you'd like to know more. They say hoarding is a type of obsessive-compulsive disorder, and it's estimated that about 1 in 4 people with OCD are also compulsive hoarders. So if you have ever been diagnosed with OCD, 1 in 4 chance that you are also stacking newspapers. Do they even have newspapers anymore? Like, is that something you can hoard?
They do, but they're not as thick as they used to be. They're like leaflets now, so it's not. It takes longer for it to become a fire hazard. Right.
Everybody's hoarding. I was about to say phone books. Those don't exist either. What are people hoarding?
Back in the day, I used to hate the newspaper subscription because it seemed like in no time you had this huge stack.
Yeah.
Like, are they bringing me 3 or 4 of these fuckers a day or what?
Half of that newspaper is ads and coupons. Now hoarding, it's a company with OCD. But hoarding itself is at its core an anxiety disorder. In fact, anxiety and depression usually come with being a hoarder. Neuroimaging studies have revealed that there's a lot of commonalities between hoarders and emotional attachments. In fact, anxiety and attachment sort of raise its ugly head whenever you refuse to get rid of something. So if you're looking at like a giant stack of VHS tapes, and you just can't get rid of them, and you emotionally fight it when somebody suggests, maybe putting those out on the doorstep or putting them in the recycling bin. If you have a legit anxiety attack when somebody wants to get rid of your stuff or when you think about getting rid of it, that's when you might want to think about getting a diagnosis.
And it's not pretty. There'll be trembling and there'll be panic and there will be a real fear of loss.
Right.
You see this on the structure of the show, the hoarders, they always go back to what happened to this person. And this person always had a tragic thing happen, whether it was a sexual assault or a death, usually a death in the family. And that's what gets their anxiety and their attachment at the level it is. Right.
Okay, so I'm really glad you went to anxiety and trauma because hoarding is a way to manage anxiety and trauma. Hoarding both relieves anxiety and it makes new anxiety. So these hoarders, when they accumulate things, like they accumulate knickknacks they like or things that they like to collect, it's actually a way to insulate themselves from the world itself. So the world outside represents whatever trauma they had gone through. And so they build a wall of literal stuff like that is eye-catchy and shiny or like has text on it. Like it has things in it that make them happy. So they build a world around them of this stuff.
It feels safe. So when well-wishing family members come in and try to throw these things away, it feels like they're ripping their heart out.
Yeah, they're literally getting rid of their buffer between trauma and world and like this insulated, I guess, haven they've built. And the more isolated they become from the outside world, the more family and friends want to do exactly that. They want to come in and get rid of this accumulated stuff. Even the thought of discarding or cleaning out hoarded items puts crazy amounts of panic and discomfort on the individual, according to the website.
I promise that people listening to this show right now, there's someone you work with or someone that you know in your family who's a hoarder that you would never expect.
Yeah.
You think you'd be able to point it out and cleanliness at work and this and that, and they keep it's a very private thing. And you'd be shocked at how many people have this problem.
My grandmother was a hoarder. I mean, like, again, I'm going to state, when we use that term, we are actually trying to use the clinical definition, not, I guess not the slang or the Twitter definition. When people on Twitter are like, I'm a hoarder, they'll use that as an excuse to show off their cool ass collection of something. Like they'll show you something neat that they got from like IKEA. We actually do mean hoarder, as in my grandmother had crates of soap and like giant collections of newspapers and nutcrackers, hundreds and hundreds.
It's very sad, very unsafe.
Yeah, and she did have a lot of trauma in her past, and so those were a thing she could look at that would build a wall between herself and the traumatic world outside. So if you are wondering while we go through this episode, maybe Sidney Deal was a hoarder. Maybe he couldn't get rid of that Burberry shirt and that gold watch and his car. That is not the same. Sidney Deal was an American. He was like the rest of us in that he liked his nice things, and those things took up a large enough space in his heart that he prioritized the cost of it versus the potential. I'm going to say right now, I'd say if he saw the engine running and he was confident in the AC being on, then it would have been a slim chance that there was a problem. And unfortunately, that slim chance bore out. He rolled the dice, and it came up snake eyes. Now we want to get into the general population. Let's talk about the rest of us. If hoarding is an OCD, an obsessive compulsive disorder, what is wrong with the rest of us that we have 7 feet worth of space in storage for every man, woman, and child?
Yeah, what's our excuse? We're somewhat mentally healthy. We should know better.
Yeah. Todd and I were in the car, and we were passing by a storage space that we pass by pretty much every time we do this show. And apropos of nothing, we started talking about the business of storage spaces. And it was kind of like one of those hypothetical, you point out a business and you say, what if we were in that business? What if we started one?
And it's not hard to figure it out. You start multiplying $300 times hundreds and hundreds of rooms. Right?
Right. So I wanted to answer that question. The explaining that not all Americans are hoarders. Very, very few of the people listening to our voices right now are going to be hoarders. And yet America as a whole is a hoarder. Our country is a hoarder. And I want to answer that question Todd asked me. How much do they make? What do you think how large do you think storage business is? I've got an answer. So the annual industry revenue for self-storage, this is self-storage, not warehousing. I want to make that difference there, because if you talk about like Amazon storage warehouses where packages are coming in and out and people are shipping, that's a totally different business. We're talking self-storage here. Self-storage meaning a family, gets in an argument over a couch. The couch goes to a steel roll-up facility, and they put it behind a big steel door, and they put a padlock on the bottom, and they forget about it. And then they pay a tax forever, $35 a month or $100 or whatever your storage space fee is. This is now, because it is a new thing. America wasn't really into self-storage before the last couple decades. It is now a $39.5 billion industry.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a B. The number of storage facilities is in the range of 50,000. So, like, you look across the American landscape, 50,000 storage units, roughly. Not units, storage facilities.
Yeah, with hundreds of units.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
We're getting into... All these numbers are so huge, I can barely conceptualize them. Like, I can't... Okay, so total rentable self-storage spaces, there's a 1.9 billion square feet. And that's where we get the number of, how many people could we fit under storage? Well, the answer is all of them. We would all be under a roof with air conditioning if we had storage units that were just for people. This article, they say it's closer to 6 square feet per person. Another one said 7 square feet. So it's in that neighborhood. Percentage of households that rent a self-storage unit, 10%. So 1 in 10 people have a storage unit where they're throwing their crap into. And I wrote a little note in here. I said, can you imagine what would happen if 1 in 10 people didn't have to spend $90 a month on storage? Like,
that's the only one of your stat I'm going to challenge. I think that's low. The $90.
Oh no, you can totally go above that. The average cost, the national average cost of a storage unit is $89.12. So it's about $90.
Seems low.
Oh, there are some really ritzy storage units that are like hundreds of dollars. There's
the ones around here, air conditioned, heated. They look like they're nicer than apartments that I've lived in.
That is exactly what I was going to say.
They have great views.
Have you ever heard of the sci-fi book Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson?
No.
It's a geeky, it's like a cyberpunk book back before that was a genre. But in it, the main character lives in a storage unit, and like it's the apocalyptic, corporate run cyberpunk future, and everybody has gone to live in storage units because they're air conditioned and they they have space for everyone.
Well, my mom has a real close dear friend of hers, and she's just a very interesting woman. Wonderful woman. She's a retired school principal. She owns horses, and she has a big property, but she went and got a storage unit, and she shared this with me. She's had it for 22 years, Joe. She paid $185 a month for it. So for that garbage dump stuff that she's told me that she has in there, she spent $48,000 on that stuff.
Good Lord. Oh, it hurt.
And she doesn't even visit it. It's just been there, and she just pays the bill every month.
You can tell it's early morning for me because my mind started reeling when you told me how much it was a month, and then you told me the total, and I think I just had a stroke. You saw half of my face go limp there for a second.
$48,000 for some garbage.
Yeah, we're not going to do the total math, but honestly, if 1 in 10 Americans wasn't paying a $90 tax every month, where could that money go to? Especially during the pandemic. I mean, if everyone had that money back right now when everyone needs a place to live during this housing crisis, that's enough to get a new place. Actually, here's another fun one. If we took all of the stuff out of storage and then scrapped it and turned it into recycling material, we could build houses out of the literal junk in storage.
Hey, I like this. You're
back to trash houses.
Sharp today. Actually, that's a great idea.
So I'm gonna read some stats, more statistics for fun to make us feel awful about being hoarding Americans. There's a website called Becoming Minimalist, and they give some more stats about crazy storage stats, basically, and they have sources, so I really love their list. They said there are 300,000 items in the average American home. That's from the LA Times. So if you go around walking through your home, Todd, just keep in mind there's 1/3 of a million things, just physical things. I don't know if we're going to count each one of these square foams on the wall as an individual thing, but now they say while 25% of people with 2-car garages don't have room to park cars inside them, 32% only have room for one vehicle. So you've visited friends and family that they never park their car inside.
Right. Because there's too much stuff in there. That's why.
That's why I'm disappointed in you, because I see your garage. There's a car in there, and there's just a couple of small things just stacked away along the sides of the garage. I step up, be an American, fill that with junk, please. You're making me feel ashamed.
Take out a loan to pay for it, right?
Yeah.
For all of this stuff. Yeah.
I will go to flea markets and garage sales with you to fill your garage so that you can be more American. The United States has upward of 50,000 storage unit facilities. That's 5 times the number of Starbucks. Which I like that statistic, because when we read earlier that there was 50,000 storage facilities, that did not give us a whole lot of context. But yeah, multiply all of the Starbucks by 5. That's how many storage facilities there are. And remember, a Starbucks can be tiny. That can be the size of a gas station. A storage unit facility is sprawling. The average American woman owns 30 outfits, one for every day of the month. In 1930, that was 9. So we have the average American woman now who has 3 times the amount of outfits that they had about 90 years ago. That's going to be a reoccurring theme in this episode. We didn't used to have this much stuff. Like, that is our attachment to things and the way we store them has increased over time, obviously.
And we're happier with less stuff.
Yeah. In fact, there's a site and a book called The Story of Stuff. And they say that we consume twice as many material goods throughout our lifetime as we did 50 years ago. Americans spend more on shoes, jewelry, and watches than on higher education. So if you're ever wondering, where did the college money go? Shoes, jewelry, watches. And that's according to Psychology Today. Americans spend $1.2 trillion annually on non-essential goods. In other words, items they don't need. That's from the Wall Street Journal.
And guitars.
Yeah, how much of that 1.2 trillion is directly going to Amazon, and how much of that is my drunken Amazon purchases?
That's a lot of money. $1 trillion with a T.
Yeah. And I did find a new job for you and I to do, Todd. We are going to get into the home organization industry. If you are good at organizing other people's junk, it is an $8 billion industry.
I've seen those. I get the flyers for those closet things. And those kitchen savers where they just build new cabinets inside your cabinets. It's kind of like, so you don't have to eliminate stuff or just have quality stuff. You can move it all around.
Section it.
Stuff more of it in. That's what it is.
That is actually what the home organization industry really is it's like, here's how to put Rubbermaid tubs into everything so that you don't have to look at your stuff and they're all in their own separate bin. Which is funny because Amazon sorting industries go by bins. So stuff goes from bins in a warehouse, and then they come to your home, and then they get stored in bins, and then eventually you get rid of those bins and put them into bins in a storage facility somewhere else. So they just go from warehouse to home to warehouse again. It's a circle of life. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, now that we have sort of explained that the first part of this narrative, the part that makes us feel like we could distance ourselves from Sidney, the part that makes us think this is an abnormal case because nobody should protect their things this hard, we all kind of do. We are all at least on the spectrum of having too much stuff and having too much attachment. So would it be okay with you if we segue back into how much did Sidney like his stuff?
Sidney, again, was impeccably dressed. This car represented something to him. It represented his new life. He got this new job. He's going to be a better providing father, a better family man. So it was a symbol of success to him. He had never had anything this nice. He was of not a lot of means growing up and everything. So this was a symbol of his life moving forward. Things were only going to get better. Until obviously this tragedy.
Right. Have you ever gotten something in your life, like a thing, and that represents you making it?
I have, because a couple times when I've got new houses, I mean, that's just a big one. You just feel amazing. You feel so successful, whether the house is 1,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet. And you feel that way when you get a new car too.
Yeah.
You just feel, especially if you've been driving a $500 car.
Right.
And you get a $5,000 or $15,000 car. It feels like a Ferrari to you.
Right.
A group of people gathered when this was all going down. And in our day with cell phones and Facebook, a lot of this was recorded. So a lot of the people that showed up, and there were a lot of people, neighbors, Sidney's brother came, Mr. Deal's brother came. And a lot of people blamed, the ongoers blamed the police officers. Police officers are there, baby's in the car, break the fucking window. It's not that tough. You're cops.
Right.
The cops were getting clearance. They were waiting to hear from their sergeant because they didn't want to get in trouble for. And how much trouble can you get into for smashing someone's car window? I mean, when a baby's life is, you're a cop.
Right.
Are we that kind of pussies that we can't really?
Yeah, I've always wondered that. In this story in particular, like the police sounded like they were taking Sidney's when Sidney says that he sees her breathing and the air conditioning's on, it really seems like they sort of take him at his word pretty much every step of this. And it's so interesting to me that the neighbors gathered at first because of the locked in car, and then they take Sidney's side and are saying that it's the police's fault for not breaking the window. That is so bizarre to me. When Sidney's grabbing his brother to keep him from knocking the glass in.
When I was reading all this story and I read through it, 5 different articles, different news outlets, this and that, I'm just looking for who I want to blame. And I don't want to spread it around. I want someone to pay for this kid's life and go to prison for the rest of their life, and this never to happen again to anybody else.
When I first read this, I was ready for an episode where we hate Sidney Deal. I was ready to want to put him in that car and then pour concrete over it and just he could stay in it. But I was shocked to hear when the neighbors took the side against the police, that the neighbors blamed them.
I just think when his brother came, took his shirt off, wrapped it around his hand, that's such a dramatic, urgent action.
Yeah.
That should have, I mean, around here, we're in Portland, Oregon. We're not in Las Vegas. Okay? If it's even a little bit warm, Joe, and there's a dog in the car, we're going to break that window.
That's what I was thinking.
And not only will someone break that window, there'll be a bunch of people cheering.
Yeah, I've seen videos on YouTube of somebody smashing a car window to get a dog out during the heat, and it's not even that hot. And the putting the shirt around the knuckles, that's a literal action scene. That's in like Fast and Furious and Gone in 60 Seconds.
Now let's put blame where it belongs on every single person that was there. These people live in Las Vegas. We have the police department. We have all the neighbors out here watching this, I guess you'd call drama, excitement. We've got 2 members, Sidney and his brother, members of the family. They know how hot it is in Las Vegas. The temperature outside is 98 degrees. So the temperature inside the car, they think the air conditioning is running. It wasn't. The temperature in the car is 107 degrees. So that poor baby is being baked to death.
I have one question for you concerning that. When does suspicion turn into broken glass? Like, how far would you let everybody in the crowd, and obviously members of the public, suspected there was something wrong, but they could hear the engine going. They could hear the car was on. So how far would you let suspicion get before you smash the window?
If anyone knew what was going to happen, they would have stopped it right that second.
Yeah.
Nobody really knew that.
I think that is the big takeaway for me.
It sounds stupid, like they're going to get in trouble for breaking a window. And
right.
It's like...
Yeah, I that's where I kind of land on this case, is I think that if anyone had honestly suspected that the air conditioning wasn't on, I think they would have broken the glass. I think his brother was in that camp. I think that he was like, 1% chance that things aren't right, that the air conditioning isn't on. I think Sidney Deal's brother was willing to smash it on that 1% chance.
I wish I could have been there and would have known that.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you that I would have acted any different. It's easy to say it after the fact.
Right.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda, when I wasn't there.
Okay. So, do you want to talk about the reasons why humans are attached to our stuff? Because this isn't new. And I kind of want to... That is ultimately what this episode is about, is we want to not just sympathize and empathize with Sidney Deal and to understand why this happened, we also want to get into the psychology of why we have so much stuff in storage and why that's not a bad thing. Like why that we've taken it too far because we all have Amazon shopping and, doorbuster days and, Black Friday sales. But why the origins of hoarding and being attached to our stuff isn't a dark place.
Are you going to address the why that I'm wondering, with that myth that someday I'm going to need this?
That's exactly what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about why we have attachments as humans and how to deal with it. If you're wondering, will I ever take up drums? Will I ever read this book a third time? Will I ever use this expensive stock pot that I bought? Forgive me, anyone who, if I've ever badmouthed BuzzFeed on this podcast, making fun of their clickbaity titles. Our source today is a BuzzFeed article because they interviewed Dr. Jessica Rasmussen. She is an instructor of psychology at Harvard Medical, and she had a lot of very interesting stuff to say about nostalgia and hoarding. Not the disorder hoarding, but our attachments to things. She says that stuff produces a lot of positive feelings in people. We get feelings of safety and pride. As somebody who owns a bug out bag, because I'm a nut job, it gives you a feeling of preparedness.
Bug out bag?
A bag full of camping gear and survival gear in case you need to grab it during an earthquake. So it's half of it is basically survival gear. The other half is like, money and information so that, I can provide that to authorities if we have a hurricane or something. Some things in your house can produce nostalgia or sentimentality. It's not just that it's, an album full of pictures. It's like, oh, I also have the tinfoil crane that a takeout meal came in, when we had this really awesome time with my friends.
Or that T-shirt or that 5K animal clinic,
Right. Oh, that's a big one. Yeah. Band T-shirts, like T-shirts from like shows that I've been to. Later on, I'll look back and be like, ugh, that show was a shit show, but I still own the T-shirt.
Or the fundraiser for the Humane Society. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything that comes from work, any T-shirt that has like a work logo on it, I still have it, even if I don't work for them anymore. It's not just that possessions or stuff give us positive experiences. We get the same positive experience from anticipating getting stuff. So obviously consumerism has increased, but like, according to this article, the satisfaction from getting the things we anticipate has stayed roughly the same. So if you go back 50 years, people had half as much junk, or a third if it was clothes. They had the same levels of happiness, self-reported, and the same levels of satisfaction as we do today. So having more, neater stuff and more readily available stuff from Amazon has not made us happier. It has basically been a level plane from the start. However, the emotional impact of having too much stuff obviously negatively affects us. People are less likely to appreciate the things they have in their immediate environment. And research also shows that having too much stuff, consuming more, doesn't increase quality of life satisfaction, but it does take up space that you may want for something else. So here's a good real world exercise if you want to conceptualize that into your life. If you want to understand if you want to understand how your life is affected by your stuff, go to every surface area in your house. And just at every table and kitchen, and like, especially a kitchen island. I'm going to coin this, the kitchen island test. If you go to your kitchen and you have like a laminate island where you're supposed to be using it for a cutting board or for mixing drinks, or it's supposed to be a space for sitting and reading. If you look at your kitchen island and it's full of junk, crock pots, mixers, things that aren't even kitchen related, just ask yourself, shouldn't I eat breakfast in this space? Am I reading a book in this nook? Or maybe these spaces aren't my spaces anymore. Maybe these spaces belong to my things instead. That is really what we're talking about when we say that we're not getting any more added life satisfaction from our things. It's because our things are actually taking up space that we're supposed to take up.
The floor is for walking.
Yes.
If you can't walk through your hallways.
Have you ever visited a friend and they warn you before you go into their house? They're like, my house is a little bit cluttered. It's how I live. I'm sorry. And then you find out that like they may not be a hoarder, but their walk space is things.
They're getting there.
They're getting there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about things we're going to use later? Well, if you have, I'm sorry to say this, I'm going to pick on you again, Todd. If you have a guitar that you've never played, or a drum, or like me, you have books on your shelf that you're not going to read again. They're just there to sort of, advertise that you're well read. Dr. Rasmussen recommends throwing them out. In fact, it's not just about the cost of replacing it. The cost of having to buy it again is small potatoes compared to what you will potentially lose. If you have a fancy set of pots to specifically cook, like say you got a stock pot for a particular type of soup, or you have an air fryer and you've never used it, just get rid of it. The cost of buying it again, things are cheap now. It's $40 online. The cost of buying it again, not only will it save you the space, but the cost will also reinforce you to use the things you buy. If you have to re-buy things to use them, you'll think twice in the future about buying something else kind of like your air fryer. Like if you never use the air fryer, you get rid of it, you end up having to buy it twice, you might think twice when you look at buying a crock pot or a pressure cooker.
Once it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and it's like it never happened.
Yeah.
You only stir up those feelings when you have it in hand, when it's right in front. You don't remember any of that stuff.
That is a perfect point, because when I have gotten rid of things, like if I want to take up a sport and I have the thing in my house, I'll look at it, like I'll look at a baseball glove or something and say, I'm going to use you soon. But when it's out of my house, I forget I was ever even going to do the activity. Like I'll think back and I'll be like, wasn't I going to take that up? But I can't remember it.
It's way at the bottom of the list of things to do.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I was going to start up tennis to lose a few pounds.
So there's an effect for what Todd is talking about. It's called the endowment effect. The endowment effect is a tricky beast. It's the idea that once we have an item, it's much more difficult to let go of it. So once something lands on our doorstep from Amazon, or once it's in our closet, we value that item much more highly than if we didn't own it. Now there's a built-in mechanism. This is a built-in mechanism to keep us from getting rid of things. So literally there's sort of like a switch in our brain that keeps us from like tossing old junk. When people think about letting go, it actually produces it produces anxiety and sadness and cortisol and frustration and anger. There is a real mechanism in the brain for negative emotions and stress when we consider, getting rid of something that could be useful. So this is again from the article. One of the rules they say that ends up being helpful is if you bring something into the house, be aware of your ebb and flow of the in and out of your household. Keep in mind, the spaces that you want to keep open for you. Like look at your kitchen island and tell yourself, this space belongs to me. It does not belong to the next air fryer. And when you go through and bring in new things into your house, get rid of one old thing. It's not so much that this is a rule for you to like clear your life of clutter. This is more just an awareness practice. I
like that. What has to go?
Yeah.
If you haven't used an air fryer, let's go to clothes. Clothes is the big one. We could buy a new article of clothing and get rid of 5 that we haven't worn in years. That'd be easy to do.
Right.
And wouldn't miss a thing.
Yeah. You'd
actually be consolidating space. And
And with fast fashion being as cheap as it is, you won't even the dent into your pocketbook won't even be that big. So I am sorry that almost every episode we do ends with the phrase, "The trick to mastering this is self-awareness." But honestly, that's most of the articles I read about this, is once you're aware of your flow in and out of your house, that you know what things you're using, what things are going in, what things are going out, it will be much, much easier for you to make that hard decision and to get rid of that air fryer and that guitar. Have you seen couples like in flea markets or doing yard sales together, like to where buying the thing itself is their activity together?
Absolutely. And collectors, they call themselves collectors.
Right.
And then you probably have another term for them, we call them enablers.
Right. Yeah, if you are in a relationship where you both enjoy this activity, where if you
hunt
both
and gatherer.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny you use that phrase, because later on at the end of the show we make the comparison that we have this built into us because it is ancient man was better for needing stuff. Like, we are tool users. Our hands are built to grab onto things, to manipulate them, to build them. We are built to want things and to hold things. Anytime we find ancient fossilized man like stuck in the mud, he's got gear on him. Like he is carrying stuff. So you go back far enough, this is what we're built for. So the enabling couple, they go and they go to yard sales and flea markets and they pick up things together, and this is their, one enables the other to keep things and to hoard it. That is very much a soothing activity for them to do. And honestly, if you are going to be successful in getting rid of clutter in your house and making yourself happier by reclaiming space, you need both people on board with this plan. You both need to put in the effort of tracking what's coming in and out, and you need to both practice that self-awareness.
Well, I want to finish out this history section. The Las Vegas PD was in an interesting, legally, they're not allowed. I looked into this. They're legally not allowed to break into someone's car unless they know that it's that person's car. So this was a new car for him, so it wasn't registered in his name yet. It was still going through the titling registration process of the state. But up until the very end, up until they had the little girl out of the car and she was already passed, Sidney Deal was pleading with everyone around the car that she could still see her breathing. So he pushed a big pause button on the rescue mission. If he hadn't been doing that, he was doing that. This was hours we're talking about now.
Okay.
He was still around his Nissan Altima pleading with people. No, she's fine. No, she's fine. The air conditioning's on. He was still saying that after all that time.
So he unwittingly hit sort of I was going to call it a sweet spot, but a weird combination of factors that meant people couldn't break his car. It wasn't technically his. It was still owned, still under somebody else's ownership, like a dealership. And also he was claiming he could see her breathe. And by claiming, I mean he legitimately might have thought he saw that. So he created like almost this double jeopardy for the cops and the civilians around. Like he created this perfect storm of they can't justify breaking it yet.
Yeah, and you would think that the social pressure would have won over.
One would think.
The strength of the crowd. And this is what I want to leave you with. The Las Vegas PD, they are sworn to protect, to serve and protect. They all make over $100,000 a year. They can replace a new window. Sidney Deal pretty much begged and made it so his daughter, who he can't replace, breathed their last breath. All to protect his stuff.
Right. He is our modern gold miner going down with the ore. Like, he's pockets stuffed full of this car, and he's going to go to the river bottom.
And you can replace a brand new Nissan Altima, right? You get another job, work another job, but you can't replace your little daughter. One solid piece of advice we can take away from today's studies: build a system to keep track of the flow in and out of your house. You don't have to get rid of everything overnight. You don't have to back a dumpster up to your front steps or anything that dramatic. If you want a new lamp off Amazon, post your old one on Craigslist. Start with a 1-to-1 ratio and evolve from there. We're wired to like our things, and that's not so bad. Imagine a primitive hunter who doesn't care about keeping a spear in working order. Imagine a carpenter who doesn't value his tools, or a farmer who doesn't value his plow. In the same vein, how do we treat people who appear shabby or unkept? Employers, hiring managers, and potential mates all judge us based on our social economic class. A huge part of that comes down to how we dress, how we express our financial prosperity, what we drive. Or to quote Twitter, we're all broke bitches trying to date someone slightly less broke than us, someone with a nice car. Things demonstrate our wealth. Things show that we have class and style, culture. Even if we never read, played, or worn the stuff in our closet, things make us happy, both when we buy them and when we think about what we could do with them. Now, in the 21st century, things come in the mail. We don't even have to leave the house for our things anymore. And if the house is on fire, we won't leave without our things either. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.